massive amount of 1K because I associate the 1K with like a scream. That's all 1K. This like sort of false note here, that's not quite in key, but I wanted to have this feeling of the synth being so loud that it's almost like pitch unstable. If I just let the initial lead turn into like a siren, so this is the main lead, and then it goes.
This episode is being supported by Tape It, the iPhone recording app made for musicians by musicians.
The real breakthrough for this song was once I wrote that lead synth melody. I mean, that was the moment where I stood up and walked around the studio 150 times listening to it. Like, did I steal this from somewhere? Like, this is so good. What is this from? You know, like I was skeptical at first because I was so happy with it. I do have that here for you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, man, that was just like, this was one of those moments where I wrote that, and I usually have one or two of these per album where I'm like I turn the volume all the way up in my studio and I'm just like, oh my God, like the next week of my life, I'm going to feel incredible because I've made this. And this just spoke to me in every way, you know? It was like, to me, this lead is like, it's a bit like Eurodance. It's a little bit like, the chord progression against it too is like, hold on, I'll play it with full mix. I think one of the revelations for me was this like sort of false note here when it goes, which that's not quite in key, but I wanted to have this feeling of the synth being so loud that it's almost like pitch unstable. Like I wanted it to sound like a firework, like whizzing off into the night sky, you know? And so I added some natural pitch instability to the synth. This is kind of what the synth sounds like before all the processing.
And what synth is it?
It's called Diva by Yuhi. So Diva does like pretty convincing like analog emulation. I'm so not a gear person. I can't buy any kind of gear because after, you know, more than a decade of just making music where everything's inside the computer, it's like, it breaks my flow state to have to look away from the screen. And so, but I fell in love with the synth. I've been using it for multiple albums. And I'll turn it up a bit, but this is how it sounded before processing. And I think I might have even just taken the initial preset and added a bit of like pitch LFO to it, just to give it that fuzziness comes from a low frequency oscillator being put onto the pitch of the lead. And then I was like, how do I make this more intense? And then the processing, I'll activate it channel by channel. So the first thing is just a massive amount of 1K because I associate the 1K with like a scream. Like a human scream is really like, it's got that, that's all 1K, you know? And then I just ran that into a bit of distortion. And you're basically there. I also use a plugin called Reverb that adds these like late swells. This like, most reverbs I think would kind of be like, gah, but like Reverb is like, gah, wow. You know, it's like, it has this like, gah, wow, gah, wow. I was just doing everything that I could to try to take the intensity and make this thing feel like, make it feel like a scream and make it feel like a firework, kind of, yeah, like whizzing.
This episode is being supported by our good friends at Tape It, the iPhone app made specifically for musicians. If you, like many of our guests, use voice memos, then as far as we're concerned, switching to Tape It is an obvious choice. It's free, and there are a load of features you won't find on Apple's Voice Memos app, including the ability to record straight from your lock screen, set markers, add notes, include photos of settings, and you can easily import your old voice notes, sync to the cloud, and create shared playlists with co-writers and bandmates. So head to the link below to install the app now. And if you want even more, check out Tape It Pro and use the promo code TAPENOTES to receive a whopping 20% off. And now, back to the episode.
My only thought was, what do I do to just increase the energy to the max here? So one of the things that I did was use the classic Eurodance octaving bass line. For somebody who's my age, this kind of sound is like incredibly nostalgic. This is like a Bass Hunter and Cascada, and this is the canon of anyone who was an internet user in 2005 to 2007. There were just tons of dance hits that used that octaving bass line, usually in this progression, usually in a 6-4-1-5 progression. Here I've done 6-4-1-3 or 3/1, or however that musicians phrase that. So I got that bass line against that lead. Those were written together. And then there's this guitar, and this is where I'm like, what even is this? Probably tons of musicians have told you this, but oftentimes the thing that ends up in the master is just the first thing that I recorded. I was just like, okay, let me get this idea down. I grabbed my guitar. I was out of tune. I turned the distortion up. I was like, honestly, you're really just hearing the root and the fifth. It doesn't matter that much that it's out of tune. I'm play it through loads of distortion. It's really not going to matter. And it's the recording that ended up in the final thing. And let's see, it's like, yeah, it's so out of tune. And you know what's funny is I didn't even know how to play power chords at that time. I was just playing kind of cowboy chords through distortion. And I'm kind of happy about that, because I think my instinct would have been to play power chords for something like this, but I tried it later, and for me it was like massively cheesy in the wrong ways. I love cheese, I love bubblegum, and I love guilty pleasures. Like all my favorite music is kind of bubblegum, but it's a fine line, you know? And like power chords were reminding me of kind of just the wrong sort of pop punk nostalgia, like nostalgia for something that I don't even really like. And so I've got these kind of just cowboy chords in G through the Helix Native. And yeah, and it's like, I guess if you're trying to capture teenage energy, like that kind of approach was really complimentary, because it was the first thing I had. It was the only way I knew to play it. I turned up the distortion to cover up the imperfection, and it just kind of creates this wall of sound when it's all together. The other bit that was hard was, how do I find a chorus that lives well against this lead melody? Because this lead melody has all these little pitch variations and all these weird notes in it. You know, how do I write a chorus that can soar over this thing that's already soaring? Because it didn't quite feel right to me to have the chorus not also have the lead. I can play what that sounds like. It works, but it's just not as captivating. So it's not fair. So I've just turned it on. Yeah. There was times where I played with the idea of having the lead only in the second half of the chorus, and it kind of cheesed me out. So I just had them play together ultimately like this. It's not fair. And there's this outro bit that used to be in the intro where I doubled the lead, and it plays a counter melody. So I wanted there to be a counter melody on top of the lead melody, but I realized it felt a bit cooler if I just let the initial lead turn into like a siren. So this is the main lead, and then it goes. And then you get that counter melody lead on top of it. This was sort of pre the phase of me like cutting the song down, because a lot of my songs tend to end up at like 5 minutes, and I cut them down to 3:30, not because of radio or anything else like that, but because like I just want them to be as Max Martin as possible, and I want them to be focused and to respect the listener's time and to hit, you know?